1782 was the year of a double abduction in Mozart's life. One was his opera, Die Entführung aus dem Serail, The Abduction from the Seraglio, which opened in July, and the other involved a little bit of 18th century scandal concerning his future wife. Actually, the problem lay with his mother-in-law. Mozart was living in the house of the Weber family, and inevitably lots of rumors and gossip emerged about him and the daughter Constanze. It was simply not on to live in the house of your girlfriend, even with the parents down the corridor. So, Constanze's guardian tried a little blackmail on Mozart. He wanted a contract guaranteeing 300 gulden a year for life, in case Mozart didn't marry Constanze. By the way, 300 gulden was roughly what Father Leopold earned in a year. The period of their engagement was far from pleasurable. All kinds of poisonous intrigues were instigated by the future mother-in-law. Once, she even threatened to have the police search for Constanze. Mozart desperately wanted to rescue her from these awful surroundings. The completion of Seraglio was crucial, because only with the money he made from that opera could he plan to start up his own family household. This story started with no less auspicious an event than the death of Empress Maria Theresia. Archbishop Colloredo of Salzburg contacted Mozart in Munich and ordered him, as one orders a salami sandwich, to accompany him to the official mourning period in Vienna. But Mozart was not all that eager to leave Munich, where he had just completed Idomeneo, and was basking in the success. Besides which, he was never overly fond of being ordered to go anywhere, and the idea of sitting in the kitchen with the servants and being paid starvation wages for doing lackey jobs was not his cup of tea at all. He was lodged in this hostel, which belonged to the Order of German Knights. Here, the Archbishop would have easy access to him, clearly a reaction to his having overstayed his leave of absence in Munich. While many of his musician colleagues were put up outside of town, he was accorded the signal honor of being given accommodations just above the Archbishop's cooks. It would be his job to represent Salzburg's musical life to the good burghers of music-loving Vienna. But Wolfgang felt he was not getting anything like his share of the limelight, and a storm began to brew. In a letter to his father, he wrote,
I assure you, I often find it difficult to throw away my luck as I am doing. As you say, I am still young, true, but to waste one's youth in inactivity in such a beggarly place is a pretty pathetic proposition.
In the course of time, Mozart had firmly made up his mind that he was going to stay in Vienna, come hell or high water. He pestered his father to approve the plan, but the old man would not be swayed. Wolfgang had a whole raft of arguments to back up his case. Vienna was the piano city. He could earn much more money here. He could even write an opera. Finally, the feared event really happened. Mozart's reaction was to call the Archbishop an arch-oaf who had wounded his sacred honor.
I am still seething with rage. And you, my dearest and most beloved father, are doubtless in the same condition. My patience has been so long tried that at last it has given out. I am no longer so unfortunate as to be in Salzburg's service. Today is a happy day for me.
It was the classic case of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. Mozart was determined not to subject himself to any humiliation, whatever the consequences to himself or his family, and the Archbishop was equally adamant that he would not put up with any insubordination. If Mozart didn't care for the conditions of his employment, he was welcome to resign, and his salary would be suspended forthwith. As Mozart wrote his father, his reply was not long in coming. He told the Archbishop,
This is final, I said. You shall have it tomorrow, in writing. Tell me now, most beloved father, did I not do it too late rather than too soon? My honor is more precious to me than anything else, and I know that it is to you too. I've played the coward twice, and I couldn't do so a third time. Now please be cheerful, for my good luck is just beginning, and I trust that my good luck will also be yours.
Typical Mozart, begging for approval of what he's already done, and using every trick in the book. Count Arco, the Archbishop's chamberlain, made one final attempt to reason with him, in response to a confidential request from Leopold.
Believe me, you've allowed all this to blind your vision. The fame of a man on this earth is not very long-lasting. From the very beginning you've received all manner of praise and profited enormously as well. That is true, but for how long? After a few months, the Viennese always want something new.
You are right, Count, but do you suppose that I mean to settle in Vienna? Not at all. I know where I shall go. That this affair should have occurred in Vienna is the Archbishop's fault, and not mine. If he knew how to treat people of talent, it would never have happened. Count Arco, I am the best-tempered fellow in the world, provided that people are the same with me. Well, he said, the Archbishop considers you a dreadfully conceited person. I dare say he does, I said, and indeed I am so towards him. I treat people as they treat me. When I see that someone despises me and treats me with contempt, I can be as proud as a peacock. You no doubt have your reason for putting up with it, and I have my reasons for not.
Mozart's mind was made up. He would remain in Vienna. He was filled with enthusiasm over Viennese musical life. For his métier, this was the best place in the world. The relations between father and son were put on ice for a long time because of this incident. Few letters were exchanged. Wolfgang had finally crawled out from under his father's coattails, while Leopold had lost all confidence in his son's viability. There were still old debts from the Paris misadventure to be paid off, and he felt that his son had simply left him in the lurch. But his ultimate disappointment was yet to come, when his son played his final card. He left the hostel and moved in with the Weber family. His father still cringed at the thought of Mannheim, where a 21-year-old Wolfgang had lost his heart, and in his father's opinion his mind, over love for the Weber's second daughter, Aloysia, and decided to rescue the entire family from poverty by taking Aloysia to Italy and making a prima donna out of her. Meanwhile, Aloysia had married somebody else, a fact Mozart used in an attempt to calm down his father.
What you say about the Webers, I do assure you, is not true. I was a fool about Aloysia Lange, I admit it. But what doesn't a man do when he's in love? Indeed, I loved her truly. And even now I feel that she is not a matter of indifference to me. It's therefore a good thing that her husband is a jealous fool and lets her go nowhere, so that I seldom have an opportunity of seeing her. And believe me when I say that old Madame Weber is a very obliging woman, and I cannot do enough in return for her kindness.
What's a poor woman to do? My dear husband and his income had gone off to the Lord, leaving me with 3 daughters to look after. When Mozart was left stranded, it seemed only logical to add him to the family. Often enough, he would spend the whole day at the keyboard, while we cleaned his room, washed his clothes, cooked his meals, and saw to it his hair was properly dressed, much to the disgust of that odd father of his, who must have been jealous. With Aloysia married, Mozart turned his attentions to her sister Constanze, who was better suited to him anyway. That's when the trouble began. My Constanze's guardian wanted something on paper. Mozart agreed to sign the engagement contract, but not my minx of a daughter, who tore it up before I could stop her. All I could do was lock her up until Mozart had received the fee for his Abduction opera.
When you're in love, even the prospect of giving piano lessons puts on a brighter face. And when the pupils are gifted, there's usually a concerto in the offing. This was the case with the Pleuer family, who, like Mozart himself, had moved here from Salzburg, albeit for very different reasons. Ignaz Pleuer had recently been knighted, and he had now come to take up residence in the capital. Mozart became a regular guest in the Pleuer home, and it was here that he met some of his most important friends. Pleuer's daughter Barbara was Mozart's last important pupil, and he clearly thought a great deal of her musicianship because he wrote a number of compositions in her copybook, including a piece dedicated to his new friend Joseph Haydn. When Barbara Pleuer premiered this G major concerto in a concert in her father's home, Mozart made a point of bringing along the Italian opera composer Giovanni Paisiello to the performance. The singing line is very operatic in style and gives us quite a clear idea of where Mozart was heading creatively. Moreover, this concerto is one of the most serene Mozart ever wrote. His father's violent disapproval of the turn of events in his life and the machinations of the shrewish, frequently inebriated Mrs. Weber had clearly taken a back seat to the contentment of a young man happily and confidently in love. Mozart had now established himself in a place where his music would get the widest possible hearing. For once, he didn't care about a steady position. He just wanted to stay here and take advantage of this most musical of cities. Vienna remained a musical mecca for years to come, and a long list of great names like Beethoven from Bonn and Brahms from Hamburg and Mahler from Czechoslovakia were all drawn here from other places to inhale the heady musical air with top-class performances everywhere. In Mozart's time, besides the imperial court, there were a host of noble houses, many of which maintained their own orchestras or even opera companies. And concerts were given all over the city, in the salons of the aristocracy, in parks and gardens, at dances and balls. Traveling musicians played in the Burgtheater, which meant local music lovers got to hear just about every important performer of the day. As if that weren't enough, in this era, before phonograph recordings, many families boasted competent musicians in their ranks, and amateur concerts in private homes were popular all over town. Public concerts were almost exclusively devoted to new compositions. Just like a television series that swallows up scripts in huge bundles, the demand for new works was enormous in Vienna, and that could only benefit a prolific composer like Mozart. Mozart seems to have devoted whatever time he had left over from teaching, performing, and writing music to getting his wardrobe in order, finding a place to live, going to the theater, and strolling in the park. Alone? Hardly. Constanze had become his girlfriend, and he enjoyed this summer of liberty in her company. He didn't do much composing, only 3 short variations and 3 violin sonatas between April and October, including this one. Although he should have been preparing for winter, which is to say, organizing compositions for his own concert appearances in the winter season, he frittered a lot of his time away. Like so many others, Mozart needed the pressure of a deadline to keep his creative juices flowing. At the very last moment before a performance, he would often gather all his forces and deliver the most inspired creations. And yet, even in this low-pressure, laid-back summer, he managed to turn out a couple of authentic masterworks, as this review in a Viennese newspaper of the time eloquently attests.
These sonatas are the only ones of their kind, rich in new ideas and traces of the author's tremendous musical genius, very brilliant and made to order for the instruments. The piano accompaniment is so artfully interwoven with the violin part that both instruments enjoy the listener's constant attention. This means the piece demands the services of a pianist on the same artistic level as the violinist. Music lovers and connoisseurs should play through it themselves, and then they will realize we are not exaggerating.
With the start of the winter season and the aristocracy returning from their country homes, Mozart threw himself into his work. His first opera commission was the Abduction from the Seraglio. His rapid working tempo was nothing new, but the speed with which he completed the first act of this piece was unprecedented even for him.
The libretto is quite good. The subject is Turkish, and the title is Belmonte and Constanze, and I intend to write the overture, the chorus in Act 1, and the final chorus in the style of Turkish music. But time is short, for it's to be performed in the middle of September, and the imminence of the performance, along with all my other prospects, stimulates me to such a degree that I rush to my desk with the greatest eagerness and remain there with the greatest delight.
The story of this opera had some rather remarkable parallels to the composer's circumstances at the time. Don Belmonte, the hero, is determined to extract his beloved, her name is Constanze, from captivity by fair means or foul, just as Mozart was determined to extract his Constanze from her mother's clutches. In fact, he referred to her removal from her mother's boarding house, which was called the Eye of God, as the abduction from the Eye of God. To add even more spice to the situation, the role of Constanze in the opera was sung by the real-life Constanze's older sister Aloysia, Mozart's former great love. And while Madame Weber applauded the performance of one daughter, she continued to keep the other one under lock and key, until the guardian got the financial assurances he had demanded. A lesser man, any normal human being, would have been sorely tried just to keep his head above water when faced with such a strident mother-in-law as Cecilia Weber. Most men would have locked themselves in their rooms, changed their names. But Mozart was quite removed from standard reactions. His genius saw to that. Therefore, during this particularly melodramatic series of variants, what did he do? Well, he wrote 6 piano concertos, among the very greatest ones. Nowhere are the melodies more ingratiating, more lovable, or more filled with joie de vivre. If the opening statement of K453 is any reflection on his future mother-in-law, she must have been badly misrepresented by history.